A first-of-its-kind trial is set to begin. Should the parents of Ethan Crumbley be held responsible for the shooting at Oxford High School? And so much drama among Michigan Republican leadership, is there any drama in the state's choice for president? Today is Sunday, January 21st, 2024, and this is Flashpoint.
Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. It is another thrilling Sunday in Detroit. We thought the officials in Dallas had robbed us of a second home playoff game, but maybe in the end, justice prevailed. And after last Sunday's electric win over the Rams this afternoon, it's the Lions hosting Tampa Bay for a chance to go to the NFC Championship game next weekend. Our pregame coverage will get underway here on Local 4 at noon today, leading up to the 3 p.m. kickoff, which you will see live right here on Local 4. But we've got several big issues to get to today before we suit up for the game. For starters, this Tuesday, what could be a groundbreaking trial will get underway. Actually, trials, because James and Jennifer Crumbley are being tried separately. We already know the Oxford High School gunman is going to spend his life in prison. What kind of responsibility do we assign to his parents? They've been sitting in jail since the shooting, meaning that they've had to wait longer to learn their futures than their son. On what issues will these trials turn? And importantly, can the approach of Oakland County Prosecutor Karen McDonald have any impact on America's school shooting crisis? We're going to talk about that just ahead this morning. Also, no surprise at all, Donald Trump won the Iowa caucuses. Tuesday brings us the nation's first true primary. Does New Hampshire change anything? I'm also hoping one of my guests can tell me who is actually in charge of the Michigan Republican Party. It's all today on Flashpoint. All right, James and Jennifer Crumbley have been in jail now since December 4th of 2021. On Tuesday, their trials get underway in Oakland County, and jurors will decide whether they are culpable for the murders carried out by their son at Oxford High School. It is a fascinating legal matter, something we have never seen. So let's set the stage with attorneys Lillian Diallo and Todd Flood. Thank you both very much for being here. Lillian, I don't want to overstate the groundbreaking nature of this, because we do see, if my kid breaks a window, I'm on the hook for the window. We have seen parents charged if they leave a gun around that a child gets a hold of. But this feels very different.
Because it's involuntary manslaughter. And what they're saying is there are two spectrums, carelessness and intentional. They're charging in not intentional but careless. So that's a hard one right there, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to understand the Crumbleys brought the gun.
Yep.
Because he could not have had that gun. They knew something was going on with their son. They are the best indicators. We are parents. We have a responsibility for our children to a certain age. If you give them, when they're having problems, the instrumentality of death, you have to lock them up. I'm not against guns, but I'm against bad ownership, right? You have to have a responsibility when you have a gun.
Which we didn't seem to have here. But Todd, why have we never seen anybody try this before in all the mass shootings that we've seen? This is a really unique approach Karen McDonald is taking on here.
Yeah, so if you look at and examine the cases that are throughout the country, I don't think you've had necessarily these specific facts where you've had a parent who knows their child is suffering from obviously mental troubles and spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
That parent, it all kind of starts at home, right? And that parent gave this person, this shooter that was facing paranoia, sent text messages that he was hallucinating in the home, asked for counseling. The parents, think about it from this standpoint, they go to the school the day of and they see a diagram, and I looked at this diagram, for which is public, and he has in there a gun that's identical to the gun that they bought him.
Yep.
It won't stop. A person shot, blood everywhere. Can you think about it from this standpoint? Ethan, let me step out in the hallway with you. Where's the gun? Let's look in the backpack. The parents didn't even care. They left. They asked, is the meeting over? They got out of there. So I think this is a very unique case from the standpoint of what we've seen around the country.
And it's there.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, that's interesting so far, then, if we talk about all of this evidence, and then we've heard all kinds of things about the Crumbleys at home, affairs, things like that. They've clearly now worked successfully at dividing and conquering, because these are separate matters now. So you may have each of them accusing the other spouse, but we also have a fight now over what should be allowed and what's not going to be allowed in court. And that's a really fascinating, that seems to me where all of this could turn on what jurors are allowed to hear.
So they're going to show them, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a video of what happened inside of the school.
Yeah.
That's going to be so inflammatory and so emotional. Are you going to be able to go past that and say, okay, let's get to the elements here? Did they prove 1, 2, 3, and 4? It's very emotional.
Yeah.
But the parents, I so agree with Todd on this one. That book bag, I thought about that. You were in the office with them. Somebody picked that book bag up and said it was heavy, but you give it back. You don't take your son with you. You are the parents. You know something is going on because the day before, the mom is saying, just don't get caught.
Right.
Right? And the thing that bothers me about Mom the most is, don't do it, Ethan. That was said right after the shooting.
Right.
There had been no
Right.
communication.
Right.
So you knew something was going on. You're at the shooting range to make him a better shooter, but they did say they took him to the eye doctor, so they're not negligent.
Yeah.
So he can see better, I guess.
Can they make the argument, though, Todd, that they felt that school was the safe? They were worried about him being at home. They didn't think he was homicidal, but they might have worried that he was suicidal, and that they were worried that he needed to be in school around other people.
I don't think that breaks the chain of causation for them. It's reasonably foreseeable, right? You got to get the causation, the factual and the proximate causation. The fact of the matter is, it's reasonably foreseeable that if you give this person a gun who is in this particular mental state, it's foreseeable something really ugly is going to happen. And in fact, it did. The evidence for what you talk about, you just balance that test. Judge Matthew, she is a pillar in Oakland County Circuit Court. She balanced it. She wrote a great opinion. It's simple. She left out certain things, right, that could be inflammatory, but obviously, it's a homicide case. You have to show the homicide, right? You got the witnesses there. You have to show the body of the wrong, the corpus delicti. You got to show that body of the wrong. So here, the shooting's going to come in. Yeah. The witnesses are going to testify to that. So I think that's highly relevant. You're not going to get into, and she left it out, the anguish, the pain and suffering, the personal things. You're not going to see that. And the judge, rightfully so, left that type of stuff out.
This, Lillian, is a case that everybody in Oakland County is so familiar with. You'd have to you must have been on vacation on the moon to not have some very strong feelings about what happens when there's a school shooting at a school in your community. Is there an argument about whether or not you can get a fair trial in Oakland County?
If we could get a fair trial for Bashar in Wayne County, we can get a fair trial in Oakland County.
There was a fair amount of pre-trial publicity,
right.
yes.
So, I think there are people that really take their job seriously of being jurors or finders of fact, right? This is going to be emotional, but and homicides are bloody businesses, as we know. It's going to be a really tough case, but I think they can if they do enough in the beginning, like do juror questionnaires and things. If you're too emotional, you don't even come in here. If you have strong opinions, just let's mesh it out and get to the heart of it.
The other thing, Todd, that's so fascinating is separate trials.
Right.
Running in a way kind of concurrently. What are the challenges then for prosecuting the case that way and also defending the case that way?
Well, no one's going to hold the jury verdict for, several months to get to the next jury. So wherever this lands, the world's going to know about it, right? Now your question is, and I think it goes to whether or not we can get a fair and impartial jury, whether or not that verdict taints the next jury. Right? Oftentimes in Wayne County, we see, and we've done it a gazillion times, we have two juries going at it at the same time, and you exclude certain testimony in front of one and put it in the other. They're not doing that in this case. This was fraught with errors because they didn't want to have an appellate issue. Could you imagine later on if they did this with one jury and both of these defendants and they start pointing the finger at each other in the middle of the trial? You would have had this reversed, right? So they have to do it this way. And I believe ultimately if we can get fair trial for Bashar. We can get a fair trial for a jury for Kwame Kilpatrick or Bobby Ferguson. You had to be living under a rock, as you well know, to not see that. So I believe jurors and judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys will make sure in their best to get a fair trial.
Last thing, I've only got about a minute left, but I wanted to let you both weigh in on whether or not this can have an impact in this American problem that we have of mass shootings. I mean, I don't know how often the shooters think about what it will mean for their parents. And often there's already a schism there at home anyway. But can this have an impact?
It should have a huge impact, and maybe we'll go backwards. Now parents know they have a responsibility. You just can't have them and leave leave all kind of things around. You have to take care of them until they're 18.
Yeah, I reverse this question. Does the parent have a duty to protect other children when they know that their child is in grave, shape? And the answer to me, common sense, is yes. I don't think, and Karen McDonald, I don't think she ever looked at this as a policy thing. She saw the statute, saw the facts, and charged it.
It's a terrific breakdown. It all gets started on Tuesday. Thank you both so much for setting the stage for us. When we come back, we'll talk politics. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. Don't go away. All right, last week on his late night show, Stephen Colbert said the only suspense in the Republican presidential primaries is figuring how long it will be before we stop acting like there's any suspense in the Republican primaries. However, Donald Trump getting taken off the ballot would certainly reshuffle the deck. Last week, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson asked the U.S. Supreme Court to speed up their decision on that very question, with the Michigan primary now just weeks away. Let's take it all in with Stephen Henderson of Detroit Today on WDET. Zoe Clark's the political director for Michigan Public Radio. Dennis Darnoy is here from Densar Consulting, and so is the political director for the Detroit News, Chad Livengood. Thanks, gang, for being here. Dennis, I'm going to start with you. Is there any way, we've got the New Hampshire primary on Tuesday. Ron DeSantis put all of his eggs in the Iowa basket, which turned out to be not a very good container for eggs. So Nikki Haley now has the same situation, it would seem, in New Hampshire. Is there any chance that this becomes anything other than what it feels like it already is?
She does. Right now she's polling about 13 percentage points behind Donald Trump. In 2016, the polls were very accurate in predicting the final margin. So she's going to have to try to do something that John Kasich did and win certain areas with moderates and independents. But he failed in 16. She's likely not to succeed. Another second place finish heading into Nevada and then South Carolina. Yeah. So I think a lot of people are going to see that second place finish and say, the writing's on the wall, let's just move on and start the general election very, very early.
Very early. Chad, we're just a couple weeks away now from the Michigan primary, which I'm still not comfortable thinking that I fully understand what the Republican primary is going to look like with this sort of split caucus primary system looking like. But this past week, Jocelyn Benson asked the Supreme Court to say, let's get on the stick here and try to and see whether or not he has his name Donald Trump's name belongs on the Michigan ballot.
Yeah, the Secretary of State is asking essentially, is he eligible? And as other people in other states are, there's this decision in Colorado, Maine, and other states that are essentially, possibly throwing him off the ballot. And they want a decision not just for the primaries; they really want it for the general election, and they need some certainty for administering elections and to understand where that process is going to go, and whether ultimately does the Supreme Court want to weigh in here and say, did President Donald Trump engage in insurrection himself on January 6, 2021? Yeah. That is a question that no court has actually decided in a criminal case yet.
Stephen, it's interesting. You can see the logic of people who say, look, this should be up to the voters to decide. And you can see even the Supreme Court justices saying that. But when the 14th Amendment was created, it wasn't with the mind of let's have the voters decide. We had just come out of the worst insurrection in the nation's history in the Civil War. Right. It was there for a reason. Should we respect that now?
Look, I fall on the side that says this is a legal and constitutional question. That was how it was framed in the amendment itself. it also gives the people a chance to reconsider that through Congress. I mean, there was a mechanism that is set up to do that. If you participate in an insurrection and you are an office holder in this country, you should not be able to run for public office in the future. That was about the end of the Civil War. That was about what the southern states did and what the officials in those states, many of them said they wanted to do once the war was over, which was to run for office in the Republic again and start the same thing over. I don't think you can treat Donald Trump differently than those people were, if you believe that he was part of an insurrection.
Zoe, I have a hard time, though, picturing what the world would look like if the Supreme Court said he can't run.
And that's exactly it. We can sit at this table and you know, talk about whether it's the Constitution of course, what the definition of, you know, office holder or official is. But what we know is that the American public right now, whether he is, you know, removed from all the ballots or not, it's not going to necessarily be a nuanced, deep conversation around a calm table. And Donald Trump talked exactly about that this week, basically alluding to the fact that there would be bedlam. That is not a reason, of course, not to follow the Constitution, but it is certainly something that is happening along the parallel conversation of what it would mean for this country. Either way, the decision is made by the Supreme Court.
Around this calm table, Dennis, what do you
right
think?
now, at least.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Supreme Court will come out with something that's probably a nuanced decision that, you know, doesn't please either side. You know, and so this will continue to move forward in some vein. The question is anything settled before the November election? And if he,
when you say this will move forward, what
I mean, I think the issue is going to move forward about whether or not he should be on the ballot. I think there's going to be something that gets kicked back to you know, to the state courts or
so
the circuit
not
courts.
giving us a definitive answer.
Exactly, and so the election's going to continue to move forward with this threat or the possibility that maybe if this is found out that he would be removed from the ballot. But by that time, the election probably will be held.
Chad, what are your thoughts?
All this is going on while there is a primary, and also nationally and in Michigan specifically, Joe Biden's polling numbers are not good. He is starting at a weak position. Trump is gaining steam. He seems to be immune to some of this. Even that Detroit News WDIV poll we just did 2 weeks ago, it showed the majority of voters don't want the Supreme Court to weigh in here. They want to weigh in on this. And so there will be bedlam. I mean, there will be.
Well, and to Zoe's point, though, that maybe shouldn't be necessarily, though, a disqualifier. That's not the courage upon which this nation was built.
Even though we can sit here and say, yeah, this should definitely be a constitutional question and whatnot, the majority of voters are not in tune to constitutional law and whatnot, and so they're looking at this and they're not looking at it, you know, in a larger view. It's day to day, and all we're seeing right now is Trump is gaining steam. You look I mean, I was at the gym on Wednesday morning. You look up or Tuesday morning after the Iowa caucuses, and it looks like Trump has been normalized again in many ways.
One of the craziest things from our poll was 7% said they would be more likely to vote for him if he ends up convicted of these which is where I guess we are.
They're unfazed by this.
They are very unfazed.
And that's crossing both party lines, and in particular the independents, where Joe Biden was really suffering in that poll.
Stephen, the Supreme Court was your beat there for a while, but this is a very different court than the one you covered. Can you read the tea leaves here? Well,
I mean, one thing I think is always true of the court is that it likes to stay out of the kind of final decision-making about political questions, if it can. And here, there is an easy out for them, right? The amendment and the legislation that has grown up around it gives them the chance to say, state elections directors can decide for themselves, and Congress can get involved and override that if they can.
Jonathan Brader, if he's watching this right now, is like, no, I don't like that, actually. No, please.
I mean, seriously, I mean, that lets them punt really here and say these are political questions.
That's Dennis's point. Yeah.
Let them decide that in the political branches.
I would also be so curious about your thoughts too, Stephen, on this. About we also have this institution of the U.S. Supreme Court that has been so diminished in the minds of many Americans. I mean, I think recent polling shows the lowest favorability or trust. I mean, in many of our institutions, right? Whether it's academia or wherever you want to go, but specifically about this body right now and these justices.
Where's the authority?
Well, that is the effect of Roe.
Yeah.
That is the effect of the Roe decision being leaked a month in advance. And that showed up in that polling there where people say, I don't trust the Supreme Court.
And I mean,
you've got a split on the court about that, right? Someone like John Roberts is really protective of that authority, the legacy, the respect that the court wants to have. Some of the newer justices seem less inclined to worry about that and are there, I think, for more political reasons than justices in the past. Can he wrangle one or two of them over to take a middle kind of position that says this is what the Constitution says, but it leaves this a possibility for the Democratic branches to do something else if they want?
Let's not forget, this is the Trump court.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we cannot ignore that.
Appointments, but I wanted to make sure we've just got a couple minutes left. I wanted to get to the soap opera that is the Michigan Republican Party, like sands through the hourglass. Dennis, another round this weekend of back and forth. But I guess my biggest question is, when there is a mess like this, Donald Trump has proven to be fairly Teflon about anything going on around him. Can the rest of the Republican Party and Republican candidates get that same sort of protection? Or, I guess what I'm asking is, does it matter what kind of mess the state party is in?
I mean, it does from a structural standpoint. To answer your first question, no one other than Donald Trump can get away with what he does.
Many it's not transferable.
It is not transferable. Many try. They try to do the name calling. They try to act just like him. And it's just not something that anyone other than Donald J. Trump can do as a candidate. But does it matter? It absolutely matters, because the state house is something that's in play. Republicans can win that back depending on how redistricting goes. It may even open up other opportunities. If you don't have a functioning state party to help guide you through that, you're going to miss out on an opportunity.
In fact, Chad, you're reporting on Friday.
The National Republican Campaign Committee sent a letter to the Michigan Republican Party, the Christina Caramo version of it, and said basically we're worried about your ability to handle money we're going to give you. You're supposed to be the ones who disperse this, and this committee cares because they got 2 congressional seats, maybe 3 or 4 in Michigan that will be in play, and at stake is the control of the U.S. House of Representatives.
And just quickly, it's why we're seeing folks like one Rick Snyder come in and being asked to basically start raising money for the state house, right? Because there's this sense of like someone's got to get to work and do that.
Yeah, tricky stuff. All right, we got to leave it there, gang. I got to get to a break. Thank you all so much for being here. We come back. We'll wrap things up. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. All right, now we can start to turn our attention to the Lions. Noon today, we'll start with a look back at that last Lions team to win a playoff game back in '91. And then starting at 1, we'll start celebrating this team that won the most recent one and now gets set for playoff game number 2, which you'll see live later today on Local 4. Meet the Press is next. Have a great week. See you next time on Flashpoint.